There are things that time seems to have forgotten, but the moment someone reaches out to touch them, they awaken, as if waiting all along. For me, that thing was an old motorcycle, a Minsk 1985, covered in dust, sleeping quietly in the corner of a rural market. That day, I only stopped by to look for a few vintage items to decorate my small cafe. But when my eyes landed on that bike, I knew I couldn't leave it behind. Its green paint was flaking, the seat cracked, the front wheel tilted awkwardly to the side. Yet somehow, there was something familiar about it, something that pulled at my heart. The old man selling it coughed and said, "Take a good look, miss. No one can ride this thing anymore. It's from the old Soviet days." I smiled faintly and brushed off a layer of dust on the fuel tank. Beneath it, the words Minsk 1985 still shone through faintly. I whispered, almost to myself, "Just like my father's bike." The man looked at me with softened eyes. He said it once belonged to a Russian hunter who had left the country decades ago, and since then, the bike had sat here, abandoned, forgotten, waiting. I paid for it, not to ride it, but to bring it back to life, the way my father used to mend everything old around the house, with patience and love. Back home, I placed the Minsk in a small shed by the river. Every evening after work, I would come out and wipe each bolt clean, remove the rust piece by piece. My hands got greasy, my nails turned black, but my heart felt strangely light. Maybe I wasn't just fixing a bike, maybe I was stitching together pieces of my own memory. When I was little, my father loved motorcycles. He rode all over the countryside on his Minsk. I used to run out to the gate every time I heard its puff-puff engine from afar. But one day, he left, forever, in an accident on that same road. His bike disappeared too. Now, standing before this one, I felt as if I could hear his voice again, echoing through that same sound of the exhaust. I learned how to take the engine apart, change the spark plug, mix oil, repaint the tank. Some nights I worked until late, with only the wind and the dim yellow light beside the bike frame. The neighbors would pass by and laugh, "Girl fixing a bike. Isn't that too hard?" And I would just smile and reply, "It's not hard, uncle. I just want to hold on to a piece of my father." Days passed. The rust gave way to shine. The dull green turned alive again. The bike started to look less like junk, more like a piece of art, sturdy, quiet, humble, but beautiful. When I tightened the final bolt and placed the newly sewn leather seat, I took a deep breath and stepped back. Before me stood not just a machine, but a living memory. I turned the key, kicked the pedal. Puff, 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 puff. The engine came alive, smoke curling softly into the sunlight. I laughed, and tears rolled down my face. In that mist of exhaust, I saw my father sitting behind me, nodding and smiling. The next morning, I rode the Minsk along the village road where I grew up. On both sides were golden rice fields, fragrant in the breeze. The sound of the engine echoed through the valley, steady and familiar. Children ran after me, laughing, "Miss, your bike is so cool. What is it called?" I smiled and said, "It's a piece of the past that's come back to life." As I rode, the sunlight spread across the fields. The bike's shadow stretched long behind me, like a thread connecting the past and the present. My father once said, "A good motorcycle doesn't just take you far, it also brings you home." I didn't understand it then. But now, with this Minsk roaring beneath me, I finally do. Not every journey is about moving forward. Some are about finding your way back, to where your heart once belonged. I named the bike, Revival. Every morning, when I start it, I hear it sound and feel as if my father is still there, not gone, just transformed into the hum of the engine, into the road beneath my wheels. The Minsk 1985 is no longer just metal and rust. It's a bridge, between generations, between loss and love, between the past that faded and the present that remembers. Maybe we all have our own Minsk 1985, something old and forgotten, that still holds a heartbeat waiting for us to listen. And if we have the patience, the tenderness to touch it again, maybe, just maybe, it will take us home, one more time. Every time I start this Minsk, its engine reminds me that no matter how much time passes, the things we truly love never really disappear. They just wait, patiently, for us to find them again, to bring them back to life. And if you've watched this far, maybe you've felt a little warmth from this story too. Thank you for staying with me, for listening, for sharing a small piece of my journey to restore something once thought lifeless, yet full of memory. If this story touched you, please like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Your support gives me the strength to keep telling more stories about small, forgotten things that still shine with love and time. Every view, every comment, every heart you leave here means more than you can imagine. Thank you for being here with me and with the Minsk 1985. A journey of revival from the heart. After the day my Minsk 1985 came back to life, I couldn't forget that sound. The soft puff-puff of the engine echoing in the yard, the smell of oil and sunlight blending together. It was more than a noise, it was a heartbeat. I realized I hadn't just revived an old motorcycle, I had revived a piece of myself, the part that loves working with my hands, being patient, and seeing beauty hidden under rust and dust. From then on, I started noticing other forgotten bikes around the village. A rusty dream leaning against a fence. An old cub sleeping under a tarp in someone's shed. Each one looked like an old friend, silent, lonely, waiting for someone to remember them. One evening, I gathered the courage to visit Uncle Tu, the most respected mechanic in town, known as the master of old engines. He lived alone in a small house by the river, where the smell of oil and the hum of machines never seemed to fade. I told him about my Minsk, how I'd restored it piece by piece on my own. He listened quietly, then smiled with the gentleness of someone who has seen time move slowly. You've got patience, girl. That's rare. This trade isn't about strength, it's about feeling. You want to learn? I nodded without hesitation. And that's how it began, my evenings spent in his little workshop, under a flickering light bulb, surrounded by the rhythm of tools tapping, engines sputtering, and the sound of the river just beyond the window. He taught me to listen, not just to the engine, but to the silence between its beats. He showed me how to mix oil just right, how to hear a problem before seeing it, and how to polish chrome so it reflects the past without erasing it. The first lessons were hard. I burned spark plugs, spilled gasoline, and once even installed the clutch cable backward. But Uncle Tu never scolded me. He would just look up and say, "Machines can be fixed. But impatience, that's the hardest thing to repair. To fix an engine, you have to love it first." That sentence stayed with me. You have to love it first. It sounded simple, but it changed everything. 6 months later, I managed to restore my first Cub 50 from 1983. I stripped it down to the frame, cleaned every part, repainted it, replaced the plug, adjusted the chain, and when it finally started, that soft, calm hum, my heart trembled. Uncle Tu patted my shoulder, smiling. "From now on, you're no longer just learning. You're part of the craft." A few weeks later, I opened a small workshop behind my cafe. I painted a wooden sign that read, "Revival Garage, where old bikes come back to life." At first, it was just local folks bringing me their broken mopeds, a rusted Cub, a leaky Dream, an old Simson with no spark. But soon, people from other towns began showing up. Some brought their father's bike. Some brought the one from their wedding day. Some just wanted to keep a piece of their youth alive. And each bike came with a story. One day, an old woman came with a Honda 67, covered in rust. She said softly, "My husband used to ride this every morning to the field. He's gone now. I just want to hear that sound one more time." It took me 3 weeks to bring it back. When the engine finally started, the sound was deep and slow, like a heartbeat that had been resting too long. The old woman touched the seat, trembling, and whispered through tears, "That's his sound. That's my husband's sound." That day, I cried too. I realized what I was really doing. I wasn't just fixing machines. I was mending people's memories. Soon, I started recording my restoration journeys and posting them on YouTube. I called the channel Revival Garage. Each episode told the story of a bike, a 1979 Minsk with a broken muffler, Cub that hadn't moved in 20 years, a Simson found in an abandoned barn. But behind each machine was a human story: love, youth, loss, nostalgia. At first, barely anyone watched. But then comments began to appear. Your video reminded me of my dad's bike. I never thought a story about an old motorcycle could make me cry. You inspired me to restore my first bike again. Thank you. I read each comment slowly, sometimes smiling, sometimes tearing up. That's when I understood, even small acts of love can ripple far beyond what we see. Now, every morning, I open my cafe, brew a pot of coffee, and step into the little workshop behind it. Sunlight filters through the slats, glinting off metal parts. The air smells of gasoline and river breeze. The sound of tools clinking has become music to me. I'm no longer afraid of grease or the smell of oil. I love the way an old bike reveals its beauty after being cleaned, the scratches, the dents, the faded stickers. They are not flaws, they are memories. They tell you where the bike has been, what roads it's seen, who it carried, who it waited for. Sometimes, in the late afternoon, I still ride my old Minsk 1985 down to the riverbank. I park it there, sit quietly, and watch the sunset over the rice fields. The air is warm, the engine hums gently beside me, and I feel a peace I can't describe. I think of my father, of Uncle too, of all the people who trusted me with their memories. And I realize, this is more than a job. It's a calling. Of course, not every day is easy. Some bikes take months to fix. Some parts are impossible to find. There are days when my hands ache, and nights when I question if I've chosen the right path. But every time a bike comes back to life, when the engine coughs, then roars, and its owner smiles or cries, I know it's worth it. Because in that moment, I'm not just restoring a machine. I'm giving someone back a piece of their heart. Revival Garage has grown since then. People don't just bring me bikes anymore. They bring me stories. They come to remember, to reconnect, to believe again that old things still matter. I'm still that same girl, hair tied back, wearing an oil-stained shirt, a wrench in hand and a smile on my face. And whenever someone asks, "Isn't this work too hard for a woman?" I laugh softly and say, "Not hard at all. I'm just helping old memories take one more ride."